manager who rang me. He said, "You're not going to believe this, Will." He said 9 out of 10 are willing to put money in, and we've just raised 300 grand. And I was like, oh my God. And you know what? They'd all broken with tradition and thought, this guy is so enthusiastic. It seems like such a good idea. He seemed like he was really passionate.
Hey guys, how you doing today? This is John Klein with BrainWith. We're here with Will Broome, CEO of UberCart. Will, how you doing today?
Hey, John, I'm great. Thanks. Great to be here.
Awesome. Well, Will, you got lots of experience in this UberCart field. We're talking about grocery stores. Tell us a little bit about where you came from first, though.
Okay, cool. Well, way back, you can probably hear I'm from the UK. I grew up in the UK. I had a bit of an extraordinary background because my dad was quite big in the theme park industry, and so we had a big sort of connection with a lot of the US theme parks, and I spent a lot of time in America, and I had this sort of crazy upbringing which gave me all sorts of crazy ideas, but really this burning desire to break away from that and do my own thing. And after many years working in the PR world for a big US company actually based in London, looking after fast moving consumer goods and doing London Fashion Week, all the promotions, and looking after lots of brands in that world, I decided to set up a retail app effectively when apps suddenly became a thing. And it was all about, originally actually, it was about navigating supermarkets, getting a text message with all your shopping lists sent by, a partner or a friend or whoever it was, or creating it yourself, and then walking into a supermarket thinking, well, I don't know where to find all these things. So wouldn't it be cool if the whole thing jumped into the right order and helped you navigate around the store? And then I realized that's great, but people didn't really want that. It wasn't enough. So I thought, well, wouldn't it be cool if you could then scan your items? You could start getting personalized pricing. And this was back in sort of 2016, 2017, before anyone had ever thought about anything like this. So, and of course, what I didn't realize was to build that would be absolutely gigantic and very, very expensive. So I raised a bit of money, and I'll come on to that in a minute, to get things going, a bit of seed capital. Obviously quickly ran out of that money and committed to a lot more. So I had to do fundraise after fundraise to get through that and make a name for ourselves. Then we got a bit of national TV, we got a bit of traction. But again, it all came back to what we started doing probably a couple of years ago, which is dynamic pricing, complete personalization, and giving people a reason to use an app in a store. And frankly, the only reason is if people get better prices. So that's where we came to, and what we've evolved into with UberCart. And now we're getting really great traction in the UK and talking to lots of big retailers in the US. I don't know if I can mention anyone specific, but probably the biggest ones of all, who have like just walk out technology, and various others. So we're starting to make a real name for ourselves. And I think really, John, because we persisted and we almost did the impossible by surviving for so many years, doing things that people almost wanted but didn't quite want, if that makes sense.
Oh yeah.
So
So
that's the
that's
sort of
awesome.
long introduction to what we're doing.
Yeah. When did you start this company? 2016, or that's kind of the
Yeah,
idea behind it?
2016. Yeah, 2016, but it was very embryonic for a long time. I mean, like, when you're in the tech world, when we're in such a big industry as well. I mean, the supermarket grocery industry and the tech industry and the AI world now, they're so huge. And we were tiny, there were like, 2 or 3 of us battling against the world for a very long time. And there are so many moving parts. There's so much politics. I can name 2 or 3 of the biggest retailers in the world that we had serious meetings with in Germany, in the UK, and the US, all of whom thought this is amazing, and then quickly stole the whole idea and pumped tens of millions into doing it themselves. But what can you do? I actually was at a conference once, and there's this big brand in the UK in the grocery industry called Innocent Drinks, and they were actually bought by Coca-Cola eventually for a lot of many millions. But I met the owner of that company, and I was telling him this, saying, look, everyone's stealing our ideas and I'm worried about telling anyone anything. And he said, well, what are you going to do? Wrap the best idea up in the world under a blanket and shove it under the bed and not tell anyone, or just get it out there and make sure that you're the best? So that's when I made the decision, right, I'm just going to tell everyone everything and just make sure we're ahead of the game and first movers, and we stay there. So that's now what we're doing.
When did you decide to do that?
Probably about 3 years in. I mean, we had 3 very slow years when we were building the technology. One of the biggest problems of all is that your technology is useless in a grocery store unless you're fully deeply integrated with their POS system and with, so there's one source of the truth. So if you're manipulating pricing and things, it has to be real time. It has to be instant, has to be so easy to use for the consumer, has to be no no manual reconciliation for the retailer, and the brands we're working with all have to have a seamless, sort of approach too. So you're covering three sort of markets, and it has to be completely automated and seamless. If there's any friction, if it's ever more complicated than just doing your shopping the normal way, then it's never going to work. So it's so all these moving parts, we had to build so many relationships, convince people to integrate with us. Here's a cool story. We had very early on, we got some great press in a big daily UK newspaper. And there was this group called Iceland who have 1,000 stores, and they're big. And they invited me to their offices, and I met the CEO and the technical director, and they both shook my hand on a all group deal, 1,000 stores. I mean, this was very early on. This would have made us overnight. And it was all done. And then their POS company, who I won't mention because it might be, defamatory or something, but they basically got worried that we were leapfrogging their self-checkout units, we were leapfrogging their everything, and short-circuiting it and putting everything in your own device instead, which is obviously the logical way that everything else has gone. So they said they would charge effectively $1 million for an integration, which should have cost about 10 grand. And so that kind of ruined that deal. And actually, here's a bit of advice for anyone out there who raises any money. I should have paid the $1 million, but I just couldn't bear to do it. And we had that money raised, and I should have put everything into that and got that big deal. I think that would have accelerated everything really quickly. But of course, it seemed like, on principle, I was like, no way, that's ridiculous. So we did it the long, hard way rather than doing that. And to be fair, that POS company's come back full circle, and they've got various big retailers who want our system now, and they're perfectly happy to integrate with us. So it's, we've kind of earned the right over a few years. But it just shows that, when you're small and when you're hustling and when you're sort of, coming up with something really great, but everyone else is bigger than you, people presume they can build it themselves. And I think it's our one problem in life to build that, right? So we're completely focused on it and can absolutely nail it, and we've lived and breathed it for years. Whereas if people try and do it as part of a million other things they're doing, they're never going to get it right. And time again, people have tried to copy us, have got so far, and then either given up or launched something that's a half-assed version of what it should be, and it never quite takes off. So, I think outsourcing to companies like us has become a bigger thing, because people trust or they're willing to take a bit more of a risk on a startup, rather than think they can just do it all themselves.
Yeah. How many stores are you in right now? Have you
Well,
integrated with?
we're only in about 100 stores, but every time we get a new group on, it's changing now. We're talking to a group, for example, with over 1,000 stores who are willing to go with all 1,200 stores from day one if we get the contract, and it's looking good. But but at first it was, even if it was a big group, they'd say, well, let's put it in one trial store or 3 trial stores. And we had one recently who put it in 4 trial stores, and then immediately rolled out to all 34 of their supermarkets in their group a couple of weeks later when they realized it was great. So we've had to do the hard yards in terms of really prove ourselves in little individual stores here and there. But now it's starting to explode. So the pipeline's huge, but we're in about 100 stores. The key thing is that we've fine-tuned the app and we've learnt on the ground with real consumers in stores. And we luckily got the trust of some really innovative retailers very early on, because you can't do this theoretically in a lab, and just hope that it's going to be like this in a real world situation. So we had some some retailers who really trusted us, let us experiment on the shop floor. And now the app, just to put it in context, what the app does is it's like a membership card. It's like a sort of digital membership card, but it's AI driven. So as people go around stores and scan the items, the app learns what their shopping habits are, what products they like, and then it starts to predict what other complementary products they might like or what alternative brands they might like. So the brands promote themselves through us, but they're targeting highly relevant customers at exactly the right time. So it works for the brands in a way that has never worked before. So even the big guys like Coca-Cola have said to us, well, we've been looking for something like this for 10 years and you're the only people doing it, which is amazing. But for the consumer, everyone in a store who's using the app might get different prices for different items based on their consumer habits. So it's basically brought the best of e-commerce into brick and mortar retail, which is something that just never happened before because of legacy, effectively. So that's what the app does. But then the next level of that is we've got a sort of almost a Tinder style swipe left and right on offers you like and don't like, and it becomes really intuitive to Gen Z. And then we have things like combo deals. So if you like this item, you might like this one. And the beauty of that is that retailers no longer have to pair products next to each other on the shelves and have all the labor intensive part, because actually it's all done through the shopping list and through the app. We call it the magic shopping list, which basically pairs up products and says, oh, you've scanned this item, therefore you might want this complementary item with it. And if you buy them both together, you get 20% off or whatever it might be. And then we do streaks. So we can do things like, if you shop in this store 3 times a week instead of twice a week, you get a free coffee when you come in on Friday, or different times a day. We can promote things in the bakery. So, so it's really dynamic and really relevant, really good. And the end result of that, we've got in this group of 34 stores, it's actually across Wales, which is part of the UK. And we've got all these, this group of 34 supermarkets, and the app is absolutely flying in those stores. And the key thing is that people who use the app spend on average across the board 19% more than people who don't use the app. So it's increasing this group's turnover by over £1 million already, even though it's only 3 months in. So it's absolutely huge for them. And it's it's game changing, because it's retaining customers. It's meaning customers shop more frequently, and people are spending 19% more every time they come in. So the only problem now is to get more of their customers using the app. I think that when you start something and a store has hundreds of thousands of customers, if you get even 1 or 2% of them using it, it's good. We're averaging 6% already, and we're fast getting towards 10% in some stores. And in the first year, we want to get to 10% of all the store's customers using UberCart, and then pushing on from there. So so we've got a great case study there, and that's what's making the world listen, because for the first time, we haven't just got a pretty, fun, exciting sounding product. We've got tangible statistical evidence to go with it. And so we can charge retailers a license fee, a SaaS fee for operating it. We charge the brands to promote through it. And then, of course, we get this huge amount of behavior pattern data, which no one's ever seen before, which is far more powerful than any loyalty systems ever produced in the past. So it's sort of a holy trinity if we get it right. And the thing we need to do to get it right now is just be first movers, as we are, and scale quickly. So that's our main aim at the moment.
Yeah, man, the data is so interesting, because you're getting the exact time that they scan it throughout the day, throughout the month, the week, the year, during Christmas time. Do they buy more of these snacks because that specific person may have a tradition to buy this kind of cookie this time of year? And that kind of data, there's really no other way to get it.
No.
I mean, so that's huge. Just selling that data straight up to, even like Coca-Cola, they're like,
And
this is great.
the other thing is it's not invasive at all, because we don't actually have to even get any personal details from the customer. And the reason for that is you don't share your phone with people generally. You're not going to say, take my phone and go shopping, right? So as long as we know that the person who's holding that device has these habits, we don't have to collect any personal data. The data is powerful enough on a user basis, because we don't gather data and sell the personal data to anyone. What we do is we provide the mechanism to resell and upsell and cross-sell. So it means that everyone has to stick with us to use the system to target the customers and get the results. We don't just give them the data to do what they want with it, because they wouldn't know what to do with it. How would they communicate with those people? Because they have to sell through stores. They wouldn't start trying to sell Coca-Cola directly to a consumer at their home. It would be too laborious. So we provide the mechanism. And the key thing to that, John, you're absolutely right on all the different variables of data we collect. But the key thing is the intent. We know what people intend to buy before they buy it, because we have a shopping list in the app. So we can see, okay, they intended to buy this product, but why did they actually buy Pepsi Max instead of Coke Zero? Or, and so we can see these trends in whether people are susceptible to offers, whether they buy by price, whether they specifically want a brand and they wouldn't try an alternative brand. And the other clever thing is that, of course, all the big brands are the ones with the big budgets, and they're the ones dominating the supermarket world and the grocery world. But actually, there are lots of thousands of little challenger brands who are on the bottom shelf at the end. They're happy to be selling 6 units a week in some stores, because they can't get the face time. They can't get in front of people at the right time. Whereas we can completely break that, and we can sort of change the way people market themselves in that world. So the idea is that the tiniest little brand can get in front of everyone if they want, for a proportionate price, because we only really charge for the redemption side. So people aren't wasting money with speculative advertising anymore. So
Mm.
it sort of revamps the whole, sort of retail media and sort of online advertising world. Our CTO actually was instrumental in the dawn of sort of online and e-commerce targeted advertising, and he sees this as the next generation of that, when you're doing it in the palm of someone's hand in real time and doing it in a much more sophisticated way. But it's the same. There's that second wave of revolution for real time promotion and marketing, which is much needed, I think, and everyone's craving it. And actually Gen Z are complete and beyond are completely expecting it.
Mm. Wow. And I know it takes so long to probably build these apps and stuff like that, but at some point, are you thinking about going from grocery store to maybe some kind of retail store like a Walgreens or a Walmart?
Yeah,
Same
definitely. So,
system?
and funny enough, again, we've had this weird kind of journey where very early on, I actually went to see Walgreens in New York. And we've been approached by people outside the grocery sector in great, but we've had, if I'm honest, a lot of near misses. We've seen people and they've loved what we're doing, but thought you're too small, it's too risky, it's too, so, and also the market wasn't quite ready for it. So no one was willing to take a punt on something that was so radical and so different. So we've kind of spoken to everyone, and I think grocery, weirdly, is the most complicated sector to be in, because you have 100,000 SKUs in each major store. You have so many variables. You have variable weight items. You have restricted items like alcohol. There's so many different things. You have reduced to sell because of sell by dates and trying to shift products. So we've had to build something so automated and sophisticated. It costs so much. I mean, I've raised I've raised $10 million basically to get it to this point. And in terms of Silicon Valley, I went to Silicon Valley last April. That's not huge, but in the UK market, that's huge because it's a much more risk averse market. It's a lot of, sort of, I don't know. It's much more based on quick revenue and profitability, whereas in the US it's a lot more entrepreneurial, it's a lot more speculative, and that's why you see the biggest tech companies in the world coming out of the US. And for every one you hear about, there are 10,000 others who didn't make it, obviously. But so for that reason, actually, we've got a lot of interest in the US, and we've spoken to all sorts of retailers, including the biggest ones you can imagine. But so we're actually setting up a Nevada company in the US to have a US base, because that will give us a much better platform financially and for investment as well. So and I've got an investment broker in London who is actually from the US. In fact, he was based in Florida, and he is, but he's based in the UK now, and he is strongly advising me to do something official in the US, sooner rather than later. So I was talking to him about that this morning, funnily enough. So yeah, so we've raised a relatively large amount of money. Most of it's gone on to the development of the tech, because that's just so sophisticated and specific. And
Mm.
now we've got this whole AI side coming into it. It's really going on to a whole new level. But yeah, so the grocery industry is the most complicated, but it means that if we can nail that sector, we can apply it to pharmaceutical, drugstores,
Mm.
fashion stores, whoever really. And we can use exactly the same principle of personalization and discounted pricing. It's almost like e-coupons and vouchers, but making it all completely automated and seamless, and you don't even have to think about it. It just bases it on.
Yeah, for that one person.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I even think that sounds like such a great idea for things that I want. You always hate getting ads. You're like, this is totally irrelevant to me.
Yeah.
But you would love a deal on the things that you buy a lot.
Yeah.
Uh,
A
and
classic example, John, is you get a lot of things, but why are these people advertising cat food to me when I've got a dog? I haven't even got a cat, but they're doing blanket promotion, and it's still the same today. And and it's so inefficient. When brands promote in supermarkets, certainly in the UK, but I'm sure it's the same in the US and everywhere else, they pay a huge premium amount to be on the third shelf at eye level or at the end of the aisle, but there's only ever 50% compliance. So what do the brands have to do? They have to do mystery shopping, go around all the stores, find that half the stores aren't even bothering to put their product at the right place that they've paid for. And even when they do, they can say, yeah, you sold 6,000 extra units, but they don't know who to, they don't have any follow-up ability. Whereas with us, we can see exactly who's bought it, and then we can look and say, oh, did they buy that product again when it wasn't on discount? Yes, they did. Great. They must love the product. Oh, no, they didn't. Perhaps give them another discount, but a slightly less deep discount to see if we can still tease them into buying it. So
wow.
there are
Yeah.
rules we can set. Um, automatically that no one has to even think about. And then we get the data and the richer the data gets, the better the rules get. And it's a kind of perpetual cycle of personalization. And that's where we are now. So so we've got a great technological product. We're just looking to scale it fast.
So are you able to sell the data for the device? Are there
Well,
privacy rules? Being that they're not putting any personal information in there, does that allow you to bypass the
yeah, it
sharing
would
of personal
do. It would
information?
do.
You're sharing like device
Yeah, and we don't do it
characteristics.
at the moment because we need a bit more of a critical mass. I mean, we've got hundreds and hundreds of thousands of records. In fact, we've probably got millions, but we need hundreds of millions to make it really, really worthwhile, I think, on that side, or really valuable. So yeah, so we absolutely could because it's anonymized. So it's just saying, these people with these devices are doing this in this part of town or in this area or in this type of store or with this, the, and you can look at the sort of demographic of the area and you can deduce so much from just the habits without knowing, it doesn't matter if it's a 50-year-old woman or a 16-year-old guy, it doesn't matter, but it's just as long as they're, and actually, I suppose there is one aspect of it, which is good for if you're targeting the younger generation. And that is the value of a 16-year-old loving Coke and switching to Pepsi and having a lifetime of buying Pepsi. That individual customer is worth tens of thousands of dollars to the brand if they can
Oh
get
yeah.
people to like their brand early. So there is value in that, and certainly when you start talking about brands like Nike and and higher value items, then that becomes really significant. So yeah, so in terms of, I mean, we different retailers want different things. Some want to capture a bit more of a bit more detail on the consumer, and that can be done, but it's a barrier to entry. And what we like is people signing up and using the app day one and not having any inhibitions about doing it or not being suspicious that they're giving too much information or whatever. So
Yeah.
it's
Or
quite
maybe some
good.
like promotions in the future, put more information in, get this discount type
Yeah,
thing. Give us your
exactly.
name and email and we'll give you some
And you
extra
can
deals. But
reward
they don't
people.
have to if they don't
Exactly.
want.
At first, it's just like WhatsApp. You just give your phone number,
Mhm.
And the beauty of that is, it's a little bit of a behind the scenes secret, is that if anyone, and it's a whole other world, when we have, so we do the loyalty thing with UberCart, but we can also do the scan and go thing where you use UberCart and then you can tap to pay without going to a till. But of course, people are nervous about that because of shrink and theft and, but there's massive security built into it anyway. But the beauty of it is, you have to verify your phone number to use the app. So if someone, you can people create a digital footprint if they're doing the scan and go part. So you can trace that customer. So we've had a situation once in the past with a store where they suspected someone of stealing something, so they just rang him up and he admitted it and said, "Oh, sorry, I'll come back in and pay for it." So it's like a whole new level of insight into the customer. And of course, customers don't want to um contravene it because they get such benefit out of using it. Why would you steal a few things and then get banned from using it? So so it's almost like a natural deterrent. But the loyalty piece, which is what we do in the mainstream, the UberCart piece for retailers, is you don't have to physically pay through the app. You can use the loyalty, scan at the till, and then pay in the usual way with your card or your phone, Apple Pay, whatever. So it just keeps it really simple. And that's what the majority of stores are doing with us now because the loyalty part is so powerful.
Is that a goal of yours in the future to be able to do transactions?
Yeah, so and we've done it in the past, and we're hooked up with lots of payment gateways. We had a big partnership with WorldPay right from the start, and we have and various others. And yeah, I mean to have to own the whole process from shopping list to payment is the holy grail. But actually, you get all the data from the loyalty piece, and I think that the main thing about that is, I think loyalty generally, old-fashioned legacy loyalty is dead. I mean, points are pointless, and everyone is still doing loyalty points. And it's a bit like people can't be bothered. There's too many different loyalty schemes out there. Whereas ours is a universal scheme. You don't have to give a huge amount of information. You just do what you do and you get instant gratification. You get money off, the whole basket, you get money off individual products, you get combo deals, you get meal deals. You can do it's limitless basically what you can do with it, what you can get out of it. So it's just a much more instant, next gen way of doing loyalty basically. Because I think
Yeah.
nobody's loyal to a store, they're loyal to a price, you know what I mean? And so actually if you can nail that part, and make it cost effective and make it really work for you, then
Yeah.
that's what we're doing,
Oh, totally true. I'm loyal to a chip. They're only chips, and I can only find them at Sprouts.
Yeah,
So we go there to Sprouts to get the chips for my
yeah,
son,
yeah.
and
Yeah, amazing.
But that's so interesting that the data itself is so interesting. All this like
Well, that's the key to everything,
data.
because the data powers the algorithm, and the more accurate that is, the more it learns. I mean, this is where AI comes in, and actually, everyone claims they do AI, and lots of people aren't really doing AI. I mean, there was a very famous scenario of a just walk out technology, which was just CCTV, but they just pretended it was AI. So it's kind of like, so it's easy to use the phrase AI and just say, it's all, it is AI, but actually AI forms just one small part of the mechanism. You have to have the mechanism of delivery. You have to have the mechanism to, for the retailer to plug into, for the POS system to plug into, for the consumer to engage with. And then the layer on top of that, that's the AI part, just fine tunes it and kind of upgrades it from machine learning to AI, and then upgrades it from, static offers. This is what we have. We have so retailers have static offers. They'll put, a bottle of Coca-Cola on offer, and it doesn't matter if you would have bought that anyway. For 3 weeks, it's the same discount for everyone. Well, what's the point of that? Because 80% of those people probably would have bought it at full price, and actually nobody new is necessarily going to, well, if somebody new did buy it, you wouldn't know, and therefore you wouldn't know who they were, and therefore you wouldn't know what to do next. So there's so much, sort of mystery in that whole world. And what takes it a step further, we've really majored on the convenience world, so the slightly smaller supermarkets. And that's because in the UK, at least, that's a third of the market. So the market's about 48 billion a year. In the US, that same market's about 110 billion. And it's the smaller convenience stores where there is zero visibility. Hardly any of them have a loyalty system. They can't compete with the majors, so their prices are a little higher. And the brands have accepted they have zero visibility. So the brands do not know what they're selling in those stores, apart from the number of units they're selling, but they don't know anything about who's buying them, why they're buying them. And in fact, I had a great example. One of our biggest investors said that with a major supermarket in the UK called Sainsbury's, they promote loads of stuff to it, but it's all irrelevant. It's so tenuous, and it's so, sort of like cracking a walnut with a sledgehammer. It's just not, it's just so blanket and so generic. And they never promote alcohol to him. And he and his family drink a shitload of alcohol. And he said he was wondering, why don't they promote alcohol? This is ridiculous. And then he realized he doesn't particularly like their alcohol selection. So he never buys alcohol from those stores, but he does from another supermarket down the road. So this supermarket who are giving him all the offers think that he's teetotal and that he doesn't drink, but actually he drinks a lot, because they don't have an insight into his habits in general. You know what I mean? Or they can't, if he's buying tonic water there, he's probably buying gin somewhere else, but they can't make that connection. And also, what UberCart does is it transcends store groups. So it will work in different store groups. So you get an aggregated view of what the same customer might be doing across 5 different supermarket groups. You see what I mean?
Mm.
So it's
Oh
way
yeah.
more powerful. And therefore you can see where the technology we've built, the algorithm, the early results we've got are so compelling, because the minute we get mass scalability and mass market appeal, suddenly that is the most valuable data ever in the history of the world, because it's the one thing that people do several times a week, buy groceries. So it's and it's essential, obviously. So it's kind of like, so scale is key to us, but even at small scale, the results we're sort of generating are dramatic and compelling and very interesting to brands. So it's so that, that works well from the outset, really.
I remember my question now, and it was, does the AI do the offers on the deals? Because that's kind of what you were talking about, is depending on the person if they're going to buy it at full price anyway. So why give them a deal?
Yeah, kind
Depending
of.
on the time and season, why give them a deal? But does AI do the deal? So that's part of the integration, is making sure that everybody's profitable, even though AI, you guys are making up the deals.
Yeah.
How do they know? Do they know the margins per product?
Yeah, so to an extent, but we set the rules to police that, because otherwise, AI can sometimes go crazy. I mean, even on Chat GPT, they have, I think people call it hallucinations. Sometimes it just goes nuts and starts giving you really strange answers on things, and so and it's getting better all the time. But yeah, so we set the rules, and we can actually override a lot of it, and we can set all sorts of manual offer criteria, and we could say we'll never discount anything more than 25%. But so we it's kind of half programmed by us, half AI taking it to the next level. And we've actually, it worked really well even before we incorporated AI about 6 months ago. But now there's an AI algorithm in there as well. It just takes things to another level and enhances it. And
Mm.
it's surprisingly, you can just see that the average basket sizes creep up that little bit more. People buy one or two extra items because they're getting deals and they're saving money on certain things, so they'll spend a bit more on other things. And the other bit that's got more clever is the suggestion, power of suggestion. So if you're scanning some rice, then you might like this particular sauce to go with it, or this chicken, which is good with this, right? And then of course we haven't done it yet, but then you get into the whole recipe shopping side, which is, all these ideas we've had for years. But one of the biggest learnings I had, and I was so guilty of this, I was really adamant to throw the kitchen sink at it and be all things to all people and do everything from day one. And my God, I spent so much money developing stuff that we never used. And I think now, a few years later, those things are highly relevant and are coming into their own. But they, back in the day, they just were too far fetched for people. And we spent hundreds of thousands developing certain features that never quite saw the light of day because we didn't do that thing that everyone tells you to do, but obviously didn't listen, which is just laser focus on one thing that people want and do it really well. And when you've got that critical mass, then build on it. And I still find that hard to do. The rest of my team are really good at that, but I fight it all the time because I think, oh yeah, but we need this extra security system, or we need this extra, gamification feature because that'll help, or this referral feature. And I win some of those battles. In fact, the referral feature is one of them. How do you get people to use something for the first time? Well, get them to share it with a friend and give them $2 or $5 off their shopping basket if their friend subsequently does a shop. And then we had one customer who got about $1,000 worth of vouchers through the app just by recommending friends. And so it works, right? But yeah, so I think, as a tech startup, you have to be disciplined to focus on one core thing that people actually want and not be afraid to pivot into the thing that people want. So like we did really. I mean, we were doing the transactional side before we were doing the offers and the promotions and the loyalty side. And then we realized, well, the only people want it really is because of the promotions they're getting through it. So we pivoted and majored on that and made the other thing the secondary thing. So yeah, so I think laser focus on one thing that goes. I heard this great story from Steve Jobs. I actually went to a thing in London years ago with a guy called I think he was called Mike Heger or something, who was something to do with Apple in the very early days. He knew Steve Jobs very well, and he said when he invented the iPod, he said to his board, "I've come up with this thing. It's 1,000 songs in your pocket that you can access anyone within 4 seconds." And then everyone went away and came back saying, "Oh my God, that's amazing. We can do digital radio and we can do this where you can share things." And he kept coming back. He says, no, we're not doing any of that. 1,000 songs in your pocket you can access in 4 seconds. And he just stuck to that one thing and absolutely nailed it. And had he made it a digital radio, like all these other people were trying to do, and all these other things, it would have confused the market. Nobody would have got the simple message. It does this one really cool thing really well. And then the
Mm.
iPod became such a thing, which obviously led to the iPhone, and then I think it's I think every entrepreneur is guilty of it, but I'm more guilty than anyone, I think, of just trying to throw the kitchen sink at everything and think and try to make the app do everything. And so we reined that in a bit and just focused on this core UberCart next gen loyalty system, which is easy to plug in, works in any store that wants to switch it on in their store as long as it's integrated. And we've got loads of integrations with POS companies, so access to thousands of stores. And it just does that one thing really well. It gives you like 25% off your shopping every time you shop with different items, and encourages you to try new things. So it's really powerful if you get that right at scale. And that's our laser focus at the moment.
Mm. I love that. Tell me about the development of it. So, do you have a background in tech development?
No, and I think in some ways that's an advantage because the amount of time. So our CTO obviously is highly technical, and we have, and I didn't even know at first that you have different people for front end and back end and UX and all the different elements and Android and iOS. We actually built our first app in native iOS. And I honestly said to the developers, right, guys, now just press that, copy and paste button and put it in Android as well. And they said, we can't do that. And I said, what do you mean? And he goes, well, it's completely different code. We've got to rebuild the whole thing. And I said, well, how much is that going to cost? And they said, about 500 grand. I was like, what? You're kidding me. I had no idea. So then you learn about React Native, how you could do it, and so all these. So I think the disadvantage was I made massive mistakes not being technical, but I think the advantage was I'm thinking as a layman consumer, and I'm saying I want the app to do this, and every technical person will say to me, well, you can't do it like that. And I'm like, well, we have to do it like that. They might, and I keep coming back to, well, if in the 60s NASA had said, well, you can't do that, you can't send a rocket up to the moon, then what are they going to do? Just give up? No, they just found a way to do it. And how, so you've just got, and I think doing that to very technical people, it's half their worst nightmare, but then becomes very exciting when they start to do it. And just, we've got this whole thing with fuel forecourts at the moment where the fuel side is really, really complicated, and no one's ever nailed loyalty in conjunction with fuel loyalty. And we're doing this big thing, and we're actually making it happen now for the first time. And literally for about 2 years, everyone's saying, it's just impossible. You can't do it. It's impossible. The way it's built in this legacy, old-fashioned way, you just can't do it. And none of the oil companies are going to change their loyalty systems. But we found a way to circumnavigate it and make it work. And so, so in that way, it's an advantage. But I'm not technical, but I've surrounded myself by technical people. And then, you get different opinions, and I've had some technical people who weren't as good as others, and we pay a premium for really good technical people. And that's where you have to be careful, because if you're developing unnecessary features, it's costing a hell of a lot of money for no quick gain. So now we've reined it in, and we're laser focused on doing the things that actually work and matter, and using that resource carefully, because tech developers are in high demand, and good ones are very, very expensive, even the junior ones, so you have to, and I'm sitting there thinking, God, how are some of these junior tech guys being paid as much as almost a CEO of quite a big company? Do you know what I mean? And it's like, well, because they're in demand and they're good, and they make it happen. So, you have to do it. So yeah, so you have to be focused for that reason, if nothing else, just so you don't keep burning cash and running out every few weeks,
Yeah. So you've raised about 10 million now.
Yeah.
What is your goal for the next year?
Well, so we've just done a sort of small round to help us achieve all our goals until the end of the year and a bit beyond. And what we're looking at doing next is a Series A, possibly in the US, and we'd be looking to do, a more significant amount in one go. So it depends on how far we've got and how much traction we've got and what we're going to be using it for. But we've got a pretty good idea. So we think that because we're getting good revenues coming in now, and we're starting to, we're starting to supplement things with that in quite a significant way, because we've made a name for ourselves, and people are coming on as paying customers as opposed to wanting to trial it, which is a big seismic shift. We'll probably look at doing a Series A, raising $5 to $10 million in one hit, and just supplementing what we're doing, get some key personnel on board, expand the development team a bit so we can accelerate. But I think the key thing really is getting some good sort of sales and marketing people on board, because at the moment a lot of it's incoming, and a lot of it's me and a couple of other guys who sort of share it between us. And it's so we're looking at, in our roadmap, we've got well, first of all, a high level data analyst, because again, at the moment our technical team are doing that, but actually a specialist guy would help us kick things on a lot, I think. And also some really prolific strategic sales guys who know the industry, have lots of contacts, and actually have experience in the sector, because there's so many politics, so many layers. I so often meet CEOs of big retail groups who love it, and then they pass it to a technical director who then thinks, shit, we should be building this. What the hell? They're taking my job here. Do you know what I mean? So there's so
Yeah.
many politics and so many different layers that you have to navigate before you even get an opportunity with someone. So I think we need to sort of, look at that side a bit and be a bit more strategic about it.
Are there ways to patent anything that you do?
That's a really good question, because we have patented things that we've done, and I've been criticized quite heavily by certain big investors, saying it's completely pointless patenting technology, because eBay, Amazon, all the big Meta, all the big guys could go around it with slight variants. There's so many different ways to try and do things. But I persisted, and we got the coolest. So we've got an Australian patent and a US patent, and the US patent is the most important one to me. In fact, it's just up for renewal now, so I've just got to pay a load of money to renew it. But the thing that was cool about that is it's such a detailed pattern on the shopping mechanism of scanning items, getting personalization, and it's a really good pattern. But the problem is, if someone really big came along and contravened that pattern, realistically, honestly, what are we going to do? Sue them and spend millions of dollars trying to sue someone who's got billions of dollars when we're
Right.
effectively, so it's more of a deterrent, and it's more of a, sort of a justification of why we've invested in the technology to say we have a US patent. And this thing arrived in the post, and it was literally like a Harry Potter parchment. It's amazing. And it's like this great big sort of parchment with all the diagrams of every, and how, what we've patented. So in answer to your question, half the world would say a tech patent is pretty useless, but I think it's cool that we've got it. And I think it shows the world that what we've developed is really, really good and has been deemed unique and inventive in the US. And therefore, there's a lot of value to it. So I think the patent adds value and credibility to what we've built. And also, when we get bigger and have more money behind us, or a big institution behind us, then it would be much more of a deterrent, because people would see we've got the patent and wouldn't try and copy it because we'd be too big, and first movers. So yeah, but I have been criticized by certain investors for spending tens of thousands of dollars on patents, which are a long-winded process. And it's easy if it's a physical product, but if it's technology, there are different ways to make things a little bit different.
Yeah, man. What is a strategy that you're implementing? So I guess I'll ask it this way. Are you more afraid of other companies coming along doing exactly what you do? Or are you more afraid of somebody like Walmart saying, that's a great idea, we're going to do it ourselves? Because they're then not in competition of you. They just don't need you.
Yeah, so that's the worst one at the moment, because a lot of the big guys have attempted to do that. I suppose the only difference is they can't quite do what we're doing. Because however good their tech teams are, they don't specialize in this, so it's never going to be as much of a focus. And so they might as well use us. But secondly, um, the fact that we're independent of the retailers is much more appealing to the brands. So what the offers we can get through the app are always going to be deeper than stores can do themselves, unless they're going to
Mm,
lose money on those products. Of course, when we're doing it, the stores are still getting the full value, so the stores are not actually losing anything. So it's a far more efficient way for a big retail group to provide this level of loyalty. The other thing
yeah.
is, we can plug into their existing loyalty. So that's even better. So if people are using UberCart in Walmart, they could get Walmart's loyalty scheme as well as our loyalty scheme on top. So they get even better value. Walmart get even more custom. And the two things work hand in hand. They could use the Walmart
Mm,
app, or they could use UberCart, and they'd still get all the offers. And with UberCart, they get even deeper offers at no extra cost to Walmart. So I think that, in answer to your question, the big guys, a few of them have taken our idea and tried to do it themselves, but it's almost not worth their while doing it themselves. And on the flip side, other people copying us, I think we've gone down such a long road with all these integrations with POS systems and nurturing relationships. It would just be so much easier to spend a lot of money to buy us than start from scratch, or not do it and do something different, because it's so painful. Even if you get the agreement of a POS company to integrate with you, they've all got roadmaps from 6 months to 2 years long, because they've got other shit to deal with. They've got thousands of stores out there using their kit that's falling over, and tills aren't working, and they're having to send engineers out, and it's a nightmare. And the other thing is, we have commercial deals with them, so they benefit from people who have our app in the stores, so they might as well help us promote it, and that's one of our biggest sales channels. So
mm,
it's almost like nurturing those relationships, getting them to agree to integrate, getting them to agree for the right price or no price at all, and then getting it deployed and promoted. And when you add all that up, that's 6 or 7 years of really, really hard work that nobody needs. And honestly, if I'd known it, but more importantly, if our investors had known that, they probably wouldn't have backed me, because they would have said, well, it's going to take far too long. So, we had to learn on the job and just keep hustling and keep positive and keep pushing and keep raising money and stay alive, basically, to realize the dream. And that's the position we've now got to, and we can really see it happening now, which is amazing. But it took time.
mm. Do you need to partner with the store in order for somebody to use the app, or do you more partner with the brand? So say somebody wants to buy a Coke, right? And say you partnered with Coke,
Yeah.
and even though you have no affiliation with Walmart, can they still get points for buying Coke at Walmart?
No, because it's not points. So the idea is it's just they get money off that Coke. The only thing Walmart would have to do is enable their tills or cashiers to scan the QR code on the app to reconcile and apply the discount. So as long as we're integrated with their point of sale system, which is easy for us to do, and when you integrate with one point of sale system, it means you're compatible with thousands of stores which are all in different groups. So it's because it's the till system, right? So so all they'd have to do is agree to accept it and then scan the QR code to apply the discount. And the idea is that the really big guys, the Walmarts in the US, the Tesco's in the UK, the Carrefours in France, although we are talking to them anyway, but those guys will only come on when we've got critical mass and they can't ignore us. I mean, they've all spoken to us and they've all been interested, but they don't need us. They probably want us a bit, but they don't need us. So they'll only need us when they're starting to lose business because everyone's going to other stores that have us. Do you see what I mean? So that's why we have to move fast and furious to get to that point. And that's kind of where it's where we're rapidly going, but we've just got to, stay the course and keep going. And that's been our focus for the last year or so.
Man, I love that. What are some good educational things that you did to prepare yourself?
From my personal point of view, or you mean in terms of
So a lot of people, school, some people don't go to school. They like books, podcasts, YouTube videos. How do you like to learn?
it's really interesting because I went away to boarding school when I was 8, so I had this education rammed down my throat. I went to university. I was actually in a band that got signed. We were terrible. We were like Bon Jovi, but 10 years too late. But we went on tour across America when we were 19 and played in little
Oh,
shitty
nice.
clubs and bars. But it was amazing fun. It was great, and I still play a little bit now. That's the reason I mention that is because it's very similar to my philosophy with business in a way, which is literally kind of just do it. You know what I mean? I think that learning from your mistakes, learning on the ground, taking the risk, having the energy, the drive, the passion, the enthusiasm, and the absolute burning desire to achieve something is far more powerful than just learning the process of how to maybe do it. However, if you're going to be a lawyer, an accountant, or anything professional, then of course you need that training and education and knowledge. But I think if you're going to be purely entrepreneurial, you just got to know how to hustle. You got to be fearless. You got to, you got to not care, but you got to put it to the back of your mind that you don't know how you're going to eat at the end of the month if you don't make something work. You know what I mean? It's kind of like, so you have to have this kind of resilience and this determination. It's almost like you have to be craving the success of making it work. And it's not even about the money. It's about the sense of achievement that you've actually done something and made a difference. And, you get the sort of, personal internal gratification that you've actually done something different and that's really worked and it's and you've been successful in those terms. So I think of course I love listening to podcasts. I go through stages. I used to read lots and lots of business books. There's this great book called Good to Great. There's one called The Beer Match Entrepreneur. I used to read these little snippets and these little stories, and I find it really inspiring and great. But you know what, if I'm honest now, I'm so run off my feet. I love scrolling through things like TikTok and just seeing all these little clips of Steve Jobs talking or whoever it might be, and all these business leaders giving little nuggets of, I mean, in fact, I was at a conference in America once, and one of the best nuggets of advice I ever got, which is it's totally non-specific. But the guy went up on stage and he started off by saying, you don't drown by falling in the river, you drown by staying there. Just meaning, well, shit's going to happen. You just got to keep clawing yourself out of it and keep hustling until you get somewhere. And I think that's probably the best advice I could give.
Mm.
Just if you're passionate about something, you're determined, whatever it is, then you'll just keep going with so much drive and enthusiasm that you'll either get there or you'll be too busy trying. You won't notice you haven't got there. Do you know what I mean? It's kind of like, and I think
Yeah.
so I think that's probably I take inspiration from little snippets and inspirational stories and little monologues of what people have done in difficult situations and how they've got out of them and, sort of, transcended everything that was against them in the world to get to where they were determined to get to. And I genuinely believe it's a determination which will always get you to some degree where you want to be. You may not get all the way, but you'll get far enough to appreciate what you've done and feel, sort of, I don't know, you've got that sort of almost self gratification that you've achieved something yourself. I think that's very important. I think it's almost why I loved my childhood, and it was crazy, and we did all these incredible things, with my dad in the theme park world. But I had this burning desire to not go into that world and do something myself, probably because I thought I was just being my dad's shadow otherwise, and I just wanted to make a name for myself and live and die by the sword that way. So yeah, so I think, I used to read lots of little business books when I had more time. But I love scrolling through, Instagram, TikTok, and I have the feed is so clever. I mean, TikTok in particular, and you start getting so many, basically what I get is sports, music, and business stuff. But the business stuff, and I have my own TikTok account actually, which has some music stuff, quite embarrassingly. But when I was in Silicon Valley last year, I started putting little business advice snippets of, how to get introduced to the right people, how to, in terms of
Mm,
fundraising, and because I've almost become an expert in fundraising more than anything else because I keep having to do it. I kept running out of money and having to do it, So, and that's obviously an important discipline with a startup business as well. And it's actually, in some ways, it's not difficult, but in most ways, it's really difficult. I have people who I work with who say, "Oh, well, we'll just go and raise £1 million, with this person. Let's ring them up." But it's never that easy. It's just not. You have to. It's just there's so many hoops you have to jump through, so many things you have to do, that all the formal side of it, all the paperwork side of it, all that, um so you just have to, and and I just somehow did it by hustling and never giving up. So I think
mm,
that's you got to be really passionate about something, and then you got to be really willing to not, if why do something tomorrow that you can do today type thing. You've got to just push and hustle, and make sure you've done everything you can to get there. And then you think, you look at Jeff Bezos, anyone, how did they do it coming from nowhere? But they did. So everyone has to start from somewhere and make it happen. So if they can do it, why can't you do it? So that's my philosophy really. Um, and
mm,
yeah, but podcasts are amazing. I mean, at the end of the day, funny enough, I don't do as much at the moment, but I used to do quite a lot of running on, out on the road and on treadmills and stuff, and going to the gym. And I would always listen to music to motivate me, but so many of my friends say I don't listen to music. I listen to podcasts. I listen to and they, there's a podcast here, which is someone who just interviews everyone from F1 bosses to, people who invented things, really, really high performing people, and tries to work out what their traits are and things like that. And it's really interesting. But for some reason, I go through little bursts of listening to them in the car, but I probably, because I'm so into music, I'm just addicted to listening to music, and particularly like, pop punk rock music to get me on the treadmill and stuff. So it's kind of, so I kind of tend to do that a bit more to almost wind down a bit and not be so obsessive about it all the time. And I also have this thing where I think, oh, I don't want to try and copy anyone too much. I think that's what we did in the band. We tried to be Bon Jovi and Guns N' Roses, and we got nowhere because we were trying to be something else. You know what I mean? We were too influenced by people and sounded too much like them, but a bad version. Whereas if you take inspiration but do your own thing and don't try and carbon copy what someone else has done, but just go with your gut, go with your instinct, and hustle harder, you sort of you find your own way. Do you know what I mean? So I think that's kind
mm,
of what my preference would be.
mm. What motivates you now? I know you kind of touched it here and there, but what would you say in a sentence or
I
two?
think, okay, so here's a good example. So I was at a conference in New York a couple of years ago, a few years ago. It's just before, in fact, it's probably just before COVID, and it was bosses of big retail groups, big pharmaceutical groups, all these big guys, and me. And I was thinking, I was very conspicuous as like the smallest startup guy there. And we were having dinner in Battery Park somewhere, and we went around the table saying, "What motivates you?" And everyone was saying, "Well, it's because it was all about money and a bit of family and a bit of whatever." Bit of sense of achievement, but it was mostly about, they weren't founders of businesses, they were high level executives in most part, right? So they were like saying, well, I've worked my way up the ladder and I really like earning the big salary, and I like and I like the trappings of it, and I like then spending time with my kids and going on nice holidays and things. And when it came around to me, it was almost like it was a parody. I didn't realize what I was saying so much, and I said, oh, yeah, I said, you know what, I think I just want global adulation. And everyone burst out laughing, saying, what the hell? What do you mean global adulation? Who are you? What the hell are you know? But the point of that was, it was almost like the sense of achievement that I set out to do something, I did it, and everyone said, shit, he did it. He's the guy who made everyone get different prices in supermarkets whenever they go in, and it works for everyone. It's
Mm,
amazing. Or it helps people who can't afford healthy food to suddenly have healthy food, or whatever it might be, some sort of sense of purpose and some sort of sense of achievement.
mm,
But if I'm really honest, I think that's because I had this lavish, almost easy upbringing. And then my dad took things a step too far in the 90s and blew everything. And I didn't care because I thought, well, I didn't want all that anyway. I wanted to do my own thing. And if I'm honest, now I'm thinking, oh my God, we worked so hard for so long. We're doing something so innovative, so different, so bold and outrageous, and it's starting to work. So actually, if I'm really honest, my motivation is starting to become a bit for the money as well, because I want to make this as valuable as possible and do really well. You know what I mean? Financially, as well as it being a massive sense of achievement. But I do remember being a kid going on holiday with my parents, sitting on a beach when I was a teenager, not being able to relax as much, thinking, well, I didn't earn this. This isn't, it didn't feel, do you know what I mean?
mm,
Not so much I didn't earn it, but I'd like it so much more if I'd worked my ass off and got to this, and I was in taking my family and friends somewhere nice and doing great things. It's almost like I had a strong sense that I'd appreciate it a lot more if I'd fought for it rather than it being on a plate. You know what I mean?
mm.
And that kind of stuck with me for some reason. And I think that is a real driving, sort of a motivating force. But there comes a point when you've been toiling for quite a few years, when you start getting impatient, thinking, "Oh, for God's sake, we built this; it's amazing. When are we going to get the huge money?" Do you know what I mean? And that's good. I think that's healthy as well, because you need to like be really, really pushing for the highest possible valuation. You know, so
Mm.
yeah. So
Yeah,
it's a bit
always,
of both,
yeah.
but I'd say most of all, it's making a difference, a sense of achievement, and actually doing something so meaningful that it becomes universally a recognizable thing that, oh,
Yeah.
like someone saying to their kids, when I was young, everyone got the same price in the supermarket unless they had a loyalty card and then they got a few quid off. But actually now everyone gets a completely different, everyone gets a completely different price based on their shopping habits, which is it's not only fairer, I think it's more rewarding for the customer, because customers are, no one's losing out, because some people are getting better prices on other things, but if they're not getting the right same prices, if you and I aren't getting the same price on one item, like a packet of M&Ms or something, we might be, I might get a better price on a bottle of wine or something, so it kind of all balances out, but it becomes more and more relevant. So I
Mm,
think that I can't believe a world where that isn't going to be the case. I mean, I really can't. I also can't believe
yeah.
there'll be a world when you do that and you've scanned all your stuff with your phone going around, and then you just don't just tap to pay and the security all happens naturally and you walk out, right? And that is coming as
Mm,
well, because why would a retailer spend $25,000 on a single self-checkout unit, which is cumbersome and keeps going wrong, and you have to get age verification. We've got age verification and face scanning built in already, so all these things are definitely going to happen, but we threw the kitchen sink in it 5 years ago, and we were too early to market, and it nearly killed us because we tried to do things that the market was not ready for. Um, and now we're seeing signs of
mm.
it becoming more mainstream every day.
Yeah. Wow. Do you have kids?
I do actually, yeah. I've got
Yeah, and so you were mentioning your upbringing and how that kind of formed your mind. How are you raising your kids now?
their lifestyle is very different, because I sort of grew up in this crazy world of theme parks and big sort of, and my dad was already a well-known entrepreneur in the UK. My kids have sort of, I mean, they're just as happy, I think, but but they've had a more modest upbringing. They've seen me toiling away a lot more, you know what I mean? And it's sort of, but I think that's been good for them. And they're now, sort of in their mid and late teens. So they're kind of, starting to get, well, they do holiday jobs and things, and they're kind of all, and we're actually all going on holiday together for a week. They're coming out for a week in a week's time. So it's kind of like, so we have this. I think I actually have a much closer relationship with them than my dad ever did with me, because he was
Mm,
all around the world all the time, and I obviously work extremely hard, but a lot of it is done from home, and then I travel and then come back, and so it's kind of like, yeah, it's a different dynamic, and they've got a different sort of perspective on things, I'm sure, and they've actually seen me building this for the last few years when they've been conscious of it, whereas in my childhood, from a very young age, it was kind of already there. And the reason for that is actually quite a key reason, is that my mother's family lived in this big old stately home in the UK, and my dad came along and married her and turned it into a theme park. So he had the infrastructure there already. It's like he used to know Mike Eisner from Disney very well, and like in fact, Mike Eisner used to come and stay with us when I was a kid. And Mike Eisner used to always say to us, "Oh my God, this I love this place more than Disney because you've got a real castle in the middle as opposed to a fake one." You know what I mean? So it was kind of like a similar concept. My dad absolutely loved Disney and everything about American culture and American theme parks, and so he actually put a British spin on it, but really was inspired by the whole sort of American dream side of things. And so he was in awe of that all the time. So that's why I spent a lot of time. Actually did an internship in Dallas for 8 months as well when I was at university in the UK. So we've always had a very close affinity with the US because of the industry he was in, I guess.
Wow. Yeah. Well, tell me anything else that you want to mention, throw out there, any words of advice, words of wisdom?
Well, I think it's just, I think I've talked about determination, passion, not being afraid. I think that another thing I often think is failure is better than regret. And I think that's
Mm. Oh yeah.
but in the UK, that's almost frowned upon a bit. You're not as encouraged in the UK
Really?
as you are in the US to be that. It's changing now, but I think, Europe is less sort of, well, certainly less enthusiastic than America about things, and also certain things anyway. And there are lots of great things about UK and Europe, obviously, but I think that in America, every kid is brought up to follow their dreams and think big and not be embarrassed about failure. And whereas there's a stigma to failure in the UK, and you have to be very, very. I was, in fact, when I was raising money a year ago, I was on this Zoom call with about 30 investors. And I was being a bit uncharacteristic. I was saying, guys, I'm so sorry I've run out of money, but this is the reason why. And I was being all diplomatic about why we needed this more money. And there was an American guy on the call, and people asked questions at the end, and they were all very positive, and they all put some more money in fact. But only because this American guy was the first guy to put his hand up and ask a question or to tell me. And he said, look, Will, I think that was brilliant. But he said, I've got one problem with you, and I've got one problem with this whole call. And I said, well, what is it? And he goes, I can't believe you've just sat here apologizing for running out of money. What you should have done is sat here and said, guys, of course we've run out of money. We're taking on something absolutely huge and global. We need a shitload more money. What, you idiots? You need to put in twice as much as you put in. Why don't you? And when he said that, I could see it on everyone's faces. They were thinking, actually, he's right. This, it's not this
Mm.
fault he's run out of money. It just costs a lot of money to do something really, really big. And as long as you're on the right trajectory, it's probably worth backing. So I would say that, be bold. Yes, you got to do a bit of research and a bit of sort of sanity checking on whether your idea is absolutely crazy. But if I'm honest, I really didn't. I thought, I can't find stuff in the supermarket. I don't like standing in line in the supermarket, and I would rather get better prices. So everyone must think that, surely. Did a bit of basic research and then just did it and managed to convince someone to give me some seed money to start it through a private equity house. And they'd never backed a startup before, but I somehow convinced them to do it. And yeah, and just went from there. So I think it's just absolute belief, absolute enthusiasm. And if you can really convey that and you actually believe it, it's infectious and people will back you. And people will forgive you as well. If as long as they know you're working night and day and doing everything you can, people won't blame you if you have to pivot or if you struggle or if you need more money. So don't be afraid. I would be afraid of going through the whole of life and not trying to do shit like this. You know what I mean? Or going through life and thinking, oh, I wish I'd just tried to do that, or what. So I think it's, I mean, what's the worst that can happen, really? The Earth's been here,
Mm.
I don't know, 6 billion years or whatever it is, or 4 billion years, and our lifetime is like a blink of an eye. So we might as well try and do something different and something, big and bold and ambitious. And that's, why not? Seriously, what's the worst that can happen? So I think it's
Yeah.
kind of like, so that would be my advice to myself. And sometimes it's difficult. I am the most resilient, almost bulletproof person I know, probably. But my God, I still wake up at 3 in the morning and lie there for a couple of hours thinking, shit, what the hell? I'm going to run out of money again, or this has gone wrong, or that, shit's going to go wrong all the time. And you just have to keep coming back from it. And the way you take comfort from that is you read any story of any major entrepreneur, whether it's Steve Jobs, Jeff Bezos, even Elon Musk, whoever. In fact, there's that great thing about WeWork. I don't know if you've seen it. It was on Apple TV about Adam Newman, who founded WeWork, and he just thought he was a rock star, and he used to kick open the doors, and he had sunglasses and leather jacket. He was a lunatic, but he somehow managed to get billions of dollars before it all went bust. And so everyone has been through the shit. There's no way anyone's had an easy ride to get anywhere successful. So everyone's been through it. So it's not just you're not alone if you're out there, whatever you're doing. If you're trying to do a huge tech thing, if you're trying to launch a new brand of electric car out of nowhere up against all the big guys who've been doing it for decades, or if you're starting a bakery or a little local gardening business, whatever it might be, it's always the same principle. And you've just got to be laser focused, determined, resilient, and just make it happen. And as long as you've got a good product, and as long as you've got something that people need, I mean, that's probably the key thing. You got to make sure you're not inventing something for the sake of inventing something, which can actually often be the case. And I think I've done that a few times with features we've done. As long as there's a need, and as long as you would need it yourself, then it's worth persisting with. And nothing's easy. It's like that old adage, I became an overnight success after 10 years of hard work. It's like, suddenly the world notices you and thinks you've come from nowhere, but they don't see the 10 years you've done to get here, and you've nearly died 100 times on the way. And that's the same for everyone. No one, there's no quick fix to it. You just got to persist. So, yeah, so that's.
I love that. One more question I wanted to ask you, because you said that you were like almost pretty much a professional at getting funded.
Yeah.
Give us a quick little spark notes on best method to get funded.
Well, I think it's obviously relationships. I think at first you've got to get in with, I mean, what most people do is they have this FFF rule, which is fools, friends, and family, to give you a bit of money to get going. I actually didn't go down that route because, in fact, I almost went down that route. I raised a bit of money through someone I was introduced to for a totally different reason. I sat in a pub with him, and he ran a private equity company, and he's become a really good friend of mine now. And he said, "Oh, what else have you got going on? You seem quite interesting." So I pulled this dossier out of my bag, and it was the idea for this app, and it was called Apples because it was an app for the grocery industry. And he said, "Well, immediately you got to change that name. You can't be called Apples." And I was really stubborn about it, saying, "Oh, I really like that name." But I told him about it, and he said, "This is actually quite a cool little last story." So he said, "Okay, long story short, we don't usually help startups. You've got no professional business plan. You're really, it's an idea, and it's a well thought out idea, and you've got lots of bits of research, and you've shown me what it's going to look like." He said, "So I think it's good." So he said, "What I'll do for you to help you is I'll take you into our boardroom in a couple of weeks' time, and I'm going to speed dial our 10 investors I know very well, and just let you talk to them for 5 minutes each and tell them about your idea." So we did this, right? And in the meantime, I thought he meant, "Oh, we're definitely going to raise some money then." So I committed to all this developers and stuff who I knew through a friend of a friend, and they started doing some work to get some wireframes together and stuff. And of course, they were sending me bills. And I actually went into a meeting, and 3 people came in with suitcases. And I said, "Well, where have they come from?" And he goes, "Well, he's come from Cambodia, he's come from Sweden, and he's come from Spain." And I was like, "Who's paying for that?" And they laughed and said, "Well, you are, because this is all." And I was like, "Oh my God, I haven't got any money. What the hell?" Anyway, so then we went and sat in his boardroom, and I had a bit of a sweat on thinking, shit, I've got to raise some money now. And the first guy he called, never forget, he was called Sir Reginald. He was a posh old English guy, lovely guy. And my friend said, "Hello, Sir Reginald, I've got a guy here. He hasn't got a particular business plan together. He certainly hasn't got an IM or a professional document for raising money, but I think he's got a really good idea. And I think he needs to, can he talk to you for 5 minutes, tell you about the idea, and then you can give him some advice." And I remember those words so well, because I thought, holy shit, I don't want advice. I need some money, like fast. God, I didn't realize this was just an advice session. So anyway, so I piled into this guy with massive enthusiasm about what I was doing. And at the end, he goes, "Okay, great. No, that sounds really good." And he asked a couple of questions. Then we did that. And we did that. We actually did that 10 times with 10 different people that we called, right? And at the end of it, my friend said, well, that seemed to go really well. I think they'll come back. They'll think about it for a few days. They'll come back with a bit of advice. And I said, well, do you think they'll give me money? And he said, well, not really, because you haven't given them any documentation. You'd have to, you haven't even got a bank account. Well, they're not going to give it. I was like, oh, shit. Anyway, 2 days later, he rang me. He said, not going to believe this, Will. He said 9 out of 10 are willing to put money in, and we've just raised 300 grand. And I was like, oh my God. And you know what? They'd all broken with tradition and thought, this guy is so enthusiastic. It seems like such a good idea. He seemed like he was really passionate.
Wow.
And the other thing is just complete honesty. So, I was really honest about everything. And I think they just liked what I had to say, and they thought, sod it, we'll back this guy. Do you know what I mean? And so that's how I got my first seed funding. Of course, then we hoovered up that money and spent it very quickly. And I had to quickly scramble and set up a bank account and do all the paperwork. And he helped me with that and charged a big fee for it. But, whatever, everyone's a winner type thing. And so that was how I first got going. Then, of course, I knew those investors, so I could go back to them time and time again, obviously through the private equity company. That investor base grew. And I suppose now, our last round, I did it with some private investors, and some friends of mine who run quite big businesses and stuff have put a bit in as well, although they're the toughest investors, because now I have to, every time I used to go skiing with them once a year for a weekend, and now I'm thinking, oh God, I'm just going to get a grilling on the chairlift all day. You know what I mean? Type of thing. But so that was probably not the best thing to do. But the point is that I go back to the same private equity company. I've probably done that for the last time now, because we need to kick on and go for a bigger VC or big, for Series A. But they have done well out of us, because it's quite easy. The other thing they did, because of those first way we raised money, they put me on Zoom calls directly with investors. They don't do that with any of the other companies they raise money for, mainly because those CEOs aren't very good at it, because they're not quite as passionate or as personable, I suppose, because I've chatted to these guys so much, they know me. So every time we've needed more money, I've done it through them. They've charged a huge fee for it, which is a little bit annoying, but that's just how it is. But they've allowed me to communicate directly with the investors. And if I can communicate directly, a tiny proportion of them are probably pissed off with me, thinking, oh my God, he keeps coming back for money, and when's this going to really take off, and why has he pivoted, and da. But the vast majority think, well, actually, we've backed him this far. We're seeing the evidence now. This is getting good. This is going to happen. So they put a bit more in, and put a bit more in. So, and of course, increase their shareholding or avoid dilution. So I would say, in terms of fundraising, it's about personal relationships. It's about honesty, passion, speaking from the heart, being able to answer the most awkward questions with complete honesty and integrity. And if you have to say, yeah, I really fucked that bit up, but that's just, that happened and I've learned from it, and I'll move on and try not to make that same mistake again. I think it's just about conversations and communication. I mean, everything comes down to that, really. And I suppose getting the foot in the door in the first place, a little bit of luck. I mean, I did loads of like Shark Tank style pitches and thought they'd gone brilliantly, but then people didn't put money in because there was a little problem with this or that, or there wasn't the right paperwork in place or whatever. So there are so many false starts. But once you get your foot in the door and get those first few investors, as long as you're really, really pushing and really communicating. I send a voluntary, I don't even have to do this, but once every 3 months or so, I send a detailed like 5-page report on what we're doing, who we've spoken to, what's in our pipeline, what's going on with the business. And investors are really encouraged by it. I've got one investor who's an old army guy who lives in Mayfair in the middle of London. And he sometimes reads to me and says, well, I've walked outside and it's a rainy day in Mayfair and I just need cheering up. Can you just tell me some good news stories, or just tell me some stories about what's going on? Had another one yesterday who's had a massive back operation. He rang me and said, oh, Will, I just wanted to hear a friendly, enthusiastic voice. Tell me what's going on. So I've got this almost weird relationship with certain investors who are really almost personally friendly and wanting to back me and really wanting it to work and helping out. And I think
Mm.
so it's just about, no, it's about building relationships, but not in a contrived way. It can only happen naturally. You have to absolutely believe it, and you have to enjoy talking to these people, and you have to not be afraid to communicate and tell them everything that's going on and the ups and downs and all that kind of thing. And I think it's it's a good sort of code to live by, and that's how I've raised the money really over the years. But there does come a time when that money runs dry if you don't kick on and show them real evidence. So, and that's where we are now. It's really starting to come good, and it's been a long time in the making. But then, Facebook probably took 10 years to monetize anything. But it's just that you don't have the luxury of huge amounts of cash to keep going forever without monetizing it. Um, so yeah, so our core focus now is laser focus on this one next generation AI UberCart loyalty system, but also monetizing it with a SaaS revenue. And it's obviously free for customers to use, but retailers and brands pay for it.
Yeah, man, that's awesome. Did when you met with your friend in the pub, the guy that got you originally connected with the investors, did you go to that pub intending to present that to him, or you guys were just talking and you were like, "Oh yeah, I have an
I was
idea."
introduced to him by an ex-girlfriend from school who I hadn't seen for years, because he wanted to put on an event for the financial world, and I was running a .com business that represented, it was like a directory representing all the coolest venues in London and all the coolest caterers and ice sculptors and florists and entertainment agencies. So I was helping him put together an event, and we came up with an idea for this event, which we actually subsequently did together. We did a few of them, and then COVID almost killed that a bit because it sort of stopped for a few years. It's still there, but we haven't done an event since. But then, he said to me, "Oh, well, we've still got another half an hour. What else you got going on?" And that's when I said, "Oh, I've been working on this thing," and I pulled it out of my bag, and that's where it started, really. Um,
Yeah, so you weren't like planning on doing it, but it just kind of was like, "Well, I guess I'm doing it now." And then you got the money, and you're like, "Well, I gotta keep
Yeah,
going,"
and I literally sort of moved on from my job before that and just did it and went all in, straight away and just risked it. And it wasn't even that easy. He told me he'd help me raise the money. I had no idea how to raise money. So he told me he'd help me raise the money. I then took that as we're definitely raising the money. And then a few weeks passed before these calls came up, and I thought, oh my God. And then he said to me, "Oh, well, I'm not sure. It's a great idea, but I've got lots of other things on. I'm not sure if I can help you raise money." And the one thing we had was by this time, our UberCart name and our logo. And our logo was a watermelon with a barcode in it, like the pips with a barcode. So it was like fresh produce, grocery, but with a barcode. And I thought it was cool. Um, and I thought, I've got to get this guy's attention in his office because he's just not coming back to me. He's like putting it off a bit. It's sort of enthusiastic, but is so busy. Is he ever going to get around? So first of all, started sending him little postcards with watermelons on, saying, "Come on, let's do this, da da da." And then he didn't really respond. So I turned up at his office one day with a massive watermelon, and I cut a chunk out of it, and I put it on his desk with like a post-it note shoved on it, saying, "Come on, we've got to do." I wrote some quirky thing, I can't remember what. And then he called me and said, "Okay, I get the message. Let's do this then. We'll do it next Tuesday in the office." And that's when we did those initial investor calls, and it was sort of over to me.
Oh
So
wow.
I even had to hustle to get those calls. You know what I mean? So it's just a case of you just have to be a bit relentless and a bit determined and just keep pushing. And then, the best idea in the world is only 1% of it. The other 99% is execution and making it happen. And that's a long, long road. But you look around, people are doing it all over the place. So you just, why not me type thing? That's the way you got to think. So
Mm.
yeah.
I think that all the time. Like, what's the difference between a Jeff Bezos and me? Is it's not, he's a human just like I am. It's knowledge, maybe time, experiences throughout his life, kind of thing that he got him to where he is.
Yeah,
So I
and
love
the other
that.
thing I think, John, is there are different levels. So Jeff Bezos and those guys, they're multi billionaires on $300 million yachts with helicopters. I mean, there are degrees of it. You could be a really successful person and be a millionaire and have an amazing lifestyle and have an amazing sense of achievement and everything. You don't have to be the biggest guy in the world. Um, and there are people I know who run very small businesses who have amazing lifestyles because they're just ruthlessly efficient and they don't, and they just make good profit. So it's kind of, yeah, you don't have to, you can strive to be Jeff Bezos, but you don't have to get to that level. And very, very few people do, obviously. And I think that, but there are different degrees. It's almost like there's room in the world for nearly everyone to be successful. And I think it's just a case of you just have to be determined and push as hard as you can and just believe it's possible. And it's, and it is possible, but you've just got to work really hard, whether you're Jeff Bezos or anyone else. It's the same thing, isn't it, really? And yeah, there's an
Yeah.
element of luck. I mean, some of the guys have got huge, they would have been really big, but they suddenly got huge because it was the right time, right place, and things, stars aligned. But I think you'll find with all those people, they would have had some degree of success anyway. It's just that they happen to hit the stratosphere because, I mean, who would have thought, selling books online when books were becoming a bit obsolete anyway at the time would become the biggest thing in the world, you know. So yeah,
Mm.
but again, laser focus on one simple thing, and then when he had a success with that, keep going. If he'd have said from day one, I want to have warehouses all over the world where you could buy anything from a trampoline to a trumpet, and you could just press a button, it'll arrive tomorrow. Everyone thought that's ridiculous. How's that? Of course, it's not possible, and he would have never got started. So he had to start somewhere and evolve, you know, and I guess that's what everyone has to do.
Mm. I like that. Well, Will, thank you so much for coming on. I really appreciate it. This was tons of golden information. Give us some connections. How can we hear more about you? How can we get in contact with you?
Okay, so well, I'm on Instagram, which is just at will.broome, Broome. I'm on my TikTok name's a bit embarrassing. It's I'm Will Broom, but I think I'm willieb.rocks, ROXX. So because it's got loads of my rock music stuff on. And actually, I have a YouTube
I
channel.
love it.
This is the funniest thing of all. I have a YouTube channel with some business stuff on, but vast majority is songs I've written and music videos I've done since lockdown. They're all like rock music and big rock ballads and stuff, and that is that channel's called Little Victories. So I think it's at Little Victories, but then the tagline under it is Willie B, because I'm Will Broom, so Willie B. So yeah, so Little Victories is, and actually this is the thing. I'm
Love
not.
it.
This is nothing to plug, but this is I have a Spotify account and an album, and that's called Little Victories. And there's a picture of me sort of sitting there in black and white with like a trying to be a rock star with no top on. Just anyway, whatever. But yeah, so I think Instagram's probably the best.
Love
And
it.
actually Will.Broom on LinkedIn. That's my most sort of, you know, all my business focus stuff really. So yeah, and the
Yeah.
company is called the product is called UberCart. It's actually spelled UBA, so UberCart, and the main company is Uber Market, which is UBA Market. And the whole philosophy behind that was, it stands for Universal Barcode Application, but but the whole philosophy was turning your supermarket into an Uber market, kind of next level, but spelled UBA. So yeah, so if you go to ubermarket.com, you'll find all our website and all the connections and stuff on there, and there's videos on there and everything.
I love that. I love that. Well, that's awesome. Guys, this is great to have Will Broom on here. This is John Klein with BrainWith. If you guys got value out of this content, please consider subscribing, leave some comments, reach out to Will, and it's all about connections. And this was great, Will. Thank you so much for coming
Thank you,
on.
John. Been an absolute pleasure. I've really loved it. Thank you.